Hi everybody, so we were woken up the other day rather rudely by some dripping water, and the culprit is this skylight here. So what I'm going to attempt to do today is reseal and reseat the skylight, and hopefully that will sort out the problem. It's twice it's happened to us now, so it really needs sorting out. Now, it's a simple skylight, but the unusuality about it is it's not just a push up with your hands, it's a wind up with this bit here. So there's a bit of mechanical connection, whereas on normal ones there might not be. So the plan is to drop the bottom half, go upstairs on top of the van. I'm going to then break the seal that's already on there and take it out, clean both parts, and then reseal it, drop them back in together, and then hopefully that will do the job. So the first part that I need to understand is how the top part and the bottom part are connected. Presumably it's a load of screws, but in order to get to those screws, what I think I have to do is drop these little panels here. Now they should come out just with a pull like that, and they're all around. And yeah, I can see some screws in there, and that's obviously part of how that's going to work. Okay, so now I've exposed all the screws along all four edges. I can see that that's how the bottom and the top bits are connected. Now the issue I now have is this mechanical bit here. Now what I could do is I could take all the screws out and that would be dropping, but it'd be hanging on by this part. So what I want to do is I want to do this part out first so that that's not taking the weight of anything. And once I've got this done, I can then take all the screws out here and drop it. Right, so I can see here that when I turn this, there's obviously an internal hard wire that turns around in there. So what I need to do, I know I need to do, is take that off. And there's also a bracket on there that holds the wire to the top part. So I also need to take off that bracket as well. Otherwise the two won't come apart. Okay, so I identified a couple of screws on the arm here that I need to, the windy handle that I need to take off. So I'm going to take those off. Now when we're sort of working with lots of different screws, always good to have something just simple like that in order to keep them safe so that you don't lose it. So let's see where we go. Okay, that's the handle out. So I can see there it's a simple winding mechanism that the handle sits on. Just needs a bit of a clean up when we put that back. But that's fairly simple. I'll just continue taking these out now. Right, so I'm going to leave that. That's obviously not coming out too easily, so perhaps there's another reason for that, but I'll get to that. But what I'm going to do now is take all the screws off around the edge, and hopefully that will just drop down. Okay, so far all the screws are the same size, so that's good. But what I have noticed is there's cavities in here, these holes, and that's where the water was coming out of the other day. So I reckon that there's still water in the bottom of that. So when I take this down, I've got to be careful that it doesn't drip all over the van. I put a screw back in there because what I've noticed is as I'm taking the screws out, it's doing that. And because it's only plastic, I don't want that end to snap when it gets too much weight for that, for where the screws are holding. So I've put one screw in there. And then when I've got only one screw that side, I'll take them out both at the same time, or apply some sort of support to that side when I'm taking that out, and hopefully that'll minimise any damage. Okay, so I've taken all the screws out, less that supporting screw that I put in, and I'm going to take that out, and with a bit of luck it should just drop, under control obviously, because I should take the weight. Okay, that's a screw out, that can drop like that. Just put this down carefully as I can, and there is the bottom part of the skylight. Do you want to just open that? And as I thought, there is water in these channels here and this corner here, because obviously I've got it at a slant.
Oh, there's a stone or something.
See, stones and a leaf. So so the seal up top there is obviously not very good. So we'll get rid of this water and then we'll crack on with the rest of it. Okay, so this is surprisingly dirty actually, considering there's water, leaves, all sorts of stuff that's in there. Right, so like I said, there's some water in all the corners here. I've just tidied a few up, but that explains why we've had trouble opening the blinds because it's been fouled by the leaves, etc., that have got in. So clearly the seal on top of the ceiling, or on top of the roof of the van, is not very good at all. So the next stage on this bit is to clean it up. So what we're going to use is just a nice clean cloth and some gentle cream cleaner, and that should get the job done. So one thing I have noticed is that panel that we couldn't get off is actually screwed from the inside down. So if you are doing this job and you have exactly the same skylight, make sure you don't force that, otherwise you're going to break it. Okay, top tip, if you are going to get into all the little crevices, then the good thing to use is one of these little cotton buds. Just wet it and put it into the channel. Put it all down there, and yeah, look at the state of that. So we've given it a good clean now, and one thing I've noticed is these little metal clips that keep some of the parts together are a bit loose. So I'm just going to open out those teeth a bit, so that when it goes back on, it grips it a bit better, like that. Okay, perfect. So one thing I've noticed is I thought that the top half of the plastic, the moulded shell, screwed to the bottom half, and that's how it was kept in place. But actually it's a bit more quality than that, because the top is actually held in place by a load of these plastic lugs here, which holds it down, and then the bottom just screws on top. So what I'm going to do, because I don't want to get this wrong, because the holes in the bottom part are in a specific area and they've got to go back into these holes there. So I'm just going to mark with a pen, go around all of them, and mark where the screw that I can see is, so that when they go back, I know which side that they all go back on. So the next stage is to take out these yellow locking sort of brackets. They're just plastic and they're put in there. Some of them have fallen straight out when I take the screw out. Some of them just need a bit of assistance, but I'm just using a flathead screwdriver to do that. They just come out fairly simply, like so. So simply, it's not that simply. Well, anyway, I'll put those out. But what I've also noticed here is that there's some rubber, some sort of expanding rubber rather than foam, and that's obviously been used, I'm presuming, to fix a leak previously, but it's obviously not done the job. So whether or not I'm going to need to take this off and then use something else, or when I take it off it's going to fit perfectly anyway, which I suspect, then that's what we'll do. But the next job, get rid of these yellow brackets, and then I should be able to push it up if the seal isn't very good. But if it is good, I'm going to go onto the top and I'm going to cut that seal away. Okay, this is the last one. Let's give it a push to see whether or not I'm going to have to get on the top to cut the seal. Let's see how this goes. No, that's quite firmly in there, so I'm going to have to get up above there and cut the seal off. So here's the top of the skylight from on top of the van. And this is what I need to break the seal that's on there. And the way I'm going to do that is by using this sharp knife here. And what I'm going to do is, you can probably see in the shadow there, but I'm just going to run underneath like so, all the way down until I can feel some resistance at the other side of the tip there, like now. So I know now that I've reached the inner plastic of this top cover. So I just need to do this all the way around, and then once I've done that, hopefully that seal will be broken enough for me to go back in the van and push it up. Okay, so I've now taken off all the seal from the top, and it's time for me to push it out, and hopefully it will push out, which means I've got all the seal. Just a point to note, what I found easier on this particular skylight was getting to that back seal where the hinges are for the cupola. The cupola have got some retaining pins in the hinge. I pulled them out, which allowed me to push the cupola forward, and I could get underneath where the hinges were, and it was a lot simpler that way. I've now put them back, otherwise it'd be tricky to get it out. So let's go and see how we do here. Okay, that's coming out all right. Oh, a little bit at the top there. I can squeeze those. Perfect. Right, so now I'm going to bring this inside.
Need a hand.
Like this. And there is the skylight. So we've got this down now, had a look at it, and there's lots of seal and it's all in a poor state. So what we're going to have to do now is take all of this sealant off. Now this was the original rubber that came with the Skylight, but you can see it's all corroded and faded and it's really bad. So that's all going to come out, and we're going to replace that with the modern sealant that we've got, which will do the job of both the sealant and the sort of the rubberized protector on this. Okay, so what we've done now, we've cleaned everything. On the top here where the seal's going to be, I've got rid of all the old seal. I've completely cleaned it with degreaser, and then I've given it a bit of a sand to give it a bit of a key. So that is now ready to receive the Skylight once we drop it in. We've done a bit of a practice, and it's easier if I'm on the roof than it is if I'm underneath it, because just the manoeuvring of it in here means that I'll probably touch the seal on something and it won't work. So next thing to do is put the seal on to here. You can see I've cleaned all the top here, given that a bit of a sand of a key as well, and that's where all the sealant is going to go, and then the weight on that will sort of like create the seal, as it were, and then we'll start putting it back together again. So because there's a tiny gap between the outer edge of the hole and the actual sun screen itself, the Skylight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an additional bead of silicone on the inside here, so that when I drop it in, then all the sides of it on the inside are covered in silicone, adding a third effectively protective layer. Now the way I'm going to do that is that I want that bead to be about 1/2 inch thick when I put it on the Skylight and on here. Now a little trick to doing that is, when you get the end of your silicone here, you quickly just cut the end off first, and then you cut a V shape to the size that you want the V to be. So we're going to cut it to be about, just being careful obviously, we're going to cut it to be about, let's see, about there. Just make that a bit bigger. I'll show you what I've done in a second. So you can see there we've cut a gap in there, and the length of the gap from there to there is going to be the height of the bead when I put that on. So I'll just show you, and then you'll see what I mean. Okay, so I'm now going to cut this up here, and what you'll see is, and I'll do it this way. Right. So this is how I want the seal to be. Doing that there, and that's how long I want the seal. Anyway, a bit messy sometimes, but the trick is to make sure that you've got the seal and there's no gaps in it. So just be careful. See, it's coming out there, it's about 1/2 inch thick. I'm going to go all the way around. As you can see, I've put 2 lines of silicone bead on there all the way around, forming a first and a second sort of defensive layer really for the rain, and hopefully that will do the trick. You can see if I bring it downwards that the size of the bead is probably about just over 1/3 inch, and that's because that's the V shape that I cut into the silicone tube itself on the end.
Gary's going to try and drop it into the gap now. Okay.
Okay, am I central?
Yeah, you seem to be. A little bit. I'm going to help you.
Right, first thing I want to do now that I've just seated that in there is to make sure it's correctly positioned, and by putting back these yellow clamps. Now you can see I've marked where the outside of the clamp was so that it needs to be pulled in or pulled out. and that's pretty perfect there. So we'll just screw that one in first. Okay, and that's pulling that down. So on that side, we're just going to come here now and do one here. Make sure that I've got that right on the line, which I have. Pull that in. And as I'm tightening these, I can feel it pulling the top down and creating that seal, which is really good. It's exactly what I'm looking for. So when I put the seal on, it's a sort of a semi-fast acting drying seal. So I've got about 45 minutes. So whilst there's not any mega rush, you also can't afford to mess around and start doing it all over again, especially after you put the inside seal first. So at the moment, touch wood, everything's good. Right, that's the last one of the clamps in. It's now in there solid. I felt it pressing on the seam, so I'm really happy with that. Just remains for me to put the bottom edge or the bottom half of the skylight back up. We'll do that in a second. I'm just going to go around and check all of these for tightness, and then that hopefully will be job done. Right, so just put that on. At the moment I've just got 2 holding screws in. It's probably a 2-man job with this one. But what I'm going to do now is completely re-put in all the screws around it, remembering not to forget the handle and the mechanism that goes into that, making sure that goes in. This little piece here goes in behind the cover as opposed to this side of the cover. Okay, last little panel in. Okay, and that's job done. Looks really good from here. We'll have to wait until the first rains in order to test to see it's worked, but hopefully it will have done.